What's up, guys? Pretty bad 0-2 day yesterday. The baseball game, maybe it should have gotten there. I don't know, man. The Cubs offense just didn't show up at all, which I did not expect. If we'd gone a first 5 inning wager on that one, it would have been a push at least, because I think it was 0-0 through 5 into the 6th. Imanaga held up his end of the bargain. I think he allowed no runs yet again. What can you do? And the hockey game was just really a disaster, although the Avs were the way more physical team. They got outshot. I mean, it's kind of expected. They are the more physical teams. You expect that to kind of take over when a team's down 2-1 like that, but they got outshot by a bit, and despite being the more physical team and winning the majority of the faceoffs, they lost badly. I think the final score was probably a little bit misleading, though, as far as how the game actually played. One of the goals was an empty netter, but it was still bad. We'll move on to today. Speaking of bad, I'm not going to have any plays in the NHL, but my Boston Bruins are about to get eliminated. They're down 3-1 now, going to Florida. Florida is sitting at a minus 212 favorite right now. The line keeps moving up on Florida. This says they open at plus 135. That's obviously not right. I don't know if they open at minus 135. I don't even know. I don't think so, because I think Florida's been around like minus 170 or so in the other home games of the series. But now, with it being 3-1 and the Bruins just looking like they're completely out of gas, Florida's now at 212, or the Bruins looking like they have no heart whatsoever. Florida's up to minus 212, 84% of the tickets and 94% of the cash on them. So they do have the cash discrepancy. I still don't think I would want to actually bet Florida here, though. I mean, obviously, you're not getting any value laying a price that's this high now in Florida. Yeah, I mean, this series, it's just gone to hell, man. I mean, obviously, the reffing is not going the Bruins' way. The Bruins are also playing like total ass over between the first two periods of game 3, the game that I was at, and the third period of game 4, which the Bruins were winning. Those 3 periods combined, the Bruins only had 8 shots combined over those 3. They had 2 each in the first 2 periods of, or at least 4 combined across the first 2. I think they had 3 and 1 maybe in I forget what it was, something like that. Or I don't even remember at this point. But or maybe it was 8 shots combined over those first 2 periods in game 3. I forget what it was. Some really low number of shots. And then I think they had 2 shots in the entirety of the third period of game 4. So I guess it was 10 shots across a span of 3 periods. There's no way that you can win like that, man. And I guess I will also point out, I'm pretty sure that Dallas only had 2 shots in, I think it was the first, or excuse me, Colorado, I think had 2 shots in the first period of their game yesterday, whatever it was, something like that. Something awful. These teams just not putting up shots. The Bruins have not been putting up any shots. Obviously, like I said, I think there was goaltender interference that wasn't called on the first goal that Florida scored in game 3. Then you had Sam Bennett, who I think he just intentionally injured Marchand. I don't think that I don't think my bias is really coming into play when I say that, even though I am biased, obviously. It is my favorite team, the Bruins, but that hit was just a cheap shot, man. I saw it happen live, and I didn't think that it was. I kind of thought it was a clean hit, but looking at the tape afterwards, I just don't think so. It was a cheap shot from behind. I thought that he just hit him in the back, but he actually hit him, which not great, but he actually hit him in the neck, basically. So I think it's kind of a neck or head injury. You just can't do that, man. It probably should have been a penalty, which of course it wasn't. Then Florida wound up scoring 4 goals on power plays in that game on kind of BS penalties. The Bruins got called on a goaltender interference. It was more of momentum just carrying the guy into the net. And I think there wasn't even a goal scored on that one anyway. Then, of course, we know what happened at the end of game 4. Bruins blew a 2-0 lead. Second goal for Florida was on a power play on another kind of questionable penalty call. Then, of course, we know Sam Bennett, who probably should have been penalized for the hit on Marchand in game 3, winds up scoring the winning goal on just blatant goaltender interference, man. I don't know what else you can say about that. The refs, there's got to be some like favoritism going on here. I don't think you could say otherwise. I mean, that was a play where clearly Coyle was shoved into Swayman and just knocking them both over. There's just no chance that Swayman can make a play on that at all. Blatant goaltender interference, nothing called, and the goal stands. Absolutely ridiculous. And that completely shifts the series and makes it a 3-1 series. But I mean, that's the situation there, whatever. And then Vancouver-Edmonton is the later game tonight. Edmonton sitting at a more heavy favorite than they were in the first home game. I think this is game 4 with Vancouver up 2-1 now. Edmonton down from minus 205 to 204 at home now in this one. 91% of the cash and 80% of the tickets. So Edmonton public, but they have more of the cash on them. I do kind of lean to the Edmonton side in this one, but you're paying a price for it, man, and I don't quite want to do that. Like, lay that much of a price. Bruins odds makers are telling you that the Oilers are the better team in this series, even though they're now down 2-1. Very strange game in the prior game in this series. Edmonton outshot Vancouver 45-18 in that game, although Vancouver did win the face-off battle and had more hits, so they were the more physical team. But still, Edmonton, they had way more shots, although part of it was that they were losing 3-1 at the end of the first period, but they cut it to 3-2 for a pretty extended period of time. So yeah, some of those shots are because they were losing by 2 goals multiple times, but some of the shot discrepancy was legitimate, man. So even though Edmonton outshot Vancouver by that much, Vancouver wound up scoring 4 goals on 18 shots. So just pretty abysmal goaltending out of Edmonton, which is not Edmonton's strength, obviously. Their strength is their offense, but still, with that much of a shot discrepancy, you kind of expect something different to happen here. Maybe that score was a little bit misleading, even though Vancouver is the more physical team here. This is a pretty close series geographically, too, so Vancouver did have a lot of fans showing up for that one, which probably still will be the case here, but odds makers telling you Edmonton's the better team, even though I think in that game they were probably about minus 180, 190, something like that, so you're really not getting any value playing Edmonton here, but down 2-1, I expect a good effort out of Edmonton in this one. So that is the way I would lean in that one, but not going to have a play on that one. We'll move over to the NBA, where I do have a play in the earlier game, which is in the Eastern Conference game, and the line continues to move up on this one, so I don't know if you're missing the boat on this one, and maybe it's a little bit too high, but I'm going to play the Knicks. I just think the situation calls for a play on the Knicks. You're getting maybe a little bit of a short line here based on where they were in the other home games. Of course, they were 5.5, I think, in game 1 and 4.5 in game 2, which that line was a little bit short. Now, it looks like they opened a pick 'em in this one. I don't think that's actually accurate. Maybe that was a look-ahead line or something. I only saw 2.5s everywhere in this one. It looks like it's ticked up a little bit from the 2.5 to 2.5 with juice. I see 59% of the tickets on the Knicks, so I'm kind of surprised that more of the public percentages on the Knicks, although they're not that heavily public. And I see 59% of the cash right now on them as well. But I did see more of the cash than the tickets on the Knicks all throughout like last night and this morning. So hopefully it's not like shifting the other way here. 2.5 is maybe slightly high based on the fact that the odds makers seem like they didn't know how to value the Anunoby injury. The Knicks played pretty well in the first game without him, but of course that's the first game without an injured player. You tend to step up without him, and the Knicks actually covered the +7 and lost by, I think, 5 in the first game against the Pacers. So then the books dropped the number to 5.5 in the next game, even though it was a better spot for the Pacers, because then it was the second game where the Knicks were without Anunoby. And the Pacers were coming off kind of a close call. So the Pacers played way better in game 4, but it was a shorter line. So based on it being 5.5 in that one, or 5 or whatever, you think that's more accurate than the Knicks should probably be. I don't know. Like, what do you give these teams for home court really in the playoffs? Like 3. So you probably expect the Knicks to be somewhere in the vicinity of like a 1-point favorite here or something like that. Maybe 1.5. So maybe there's not that much line value here in taking the Knicks, but I still kind of like it, man, just because of the spot. I'm going to lay the 2.5 with the Knicks. And like I said, it does look like it's gone up from the 2.5. And it looks like it is moving in the direction of the Knicks. So maybe the 2.5 is still going to beat the closing line in this one. This is just it's a typical playoff spot. I think the series is now tied 2-2. The home team has won every game in the series, although you could argue that the Pacers could have won either or both of the 2 games at Indiana. But Game 2, I think, was kind of dominant, or at the Knicks, at New York. Game 2 was kind of dominated by the Knicks, so it's just Jalen Brunson missed the second quarter, and when he was in the game, they played a lot better, and they kind of dominated the game when he was in there. Game 1 was a game where the Knicks were trailing more often than they were winning. So that one, yeah, the Knicks kind of escaped in that one. But then that's why I liked the Knicks in Game 2, to turn it around and play better, which they did. It was just that Brunson getting injured kind of affected them a little bit. Brunson, I'm assuming he's going to play again. He's just gutting through injuries, basically, even though he's been listed on the injury report. He's actually not even on the injury report in this one. So he probably is going to play. Mitchell Robinson, of course, is going to be out for the entire series. He might be out for the entire playoffs. He went down in Game 1. Knicks played fine without him in Game 2, though. He is one of their big men. Anunoby is a much more significant injury. He is potentially going to be back before the end of the series, but he's not playing tonight, as the line is indicating. He's going to miss a third straight game. And he is a guy that does have a big impact, but I think the Knicks are going to step it up in this one, man. And Indiana, I mean, when you win by that much, like, what do you do after that? That's why I'm playing this game. It's like, what adjustments can you possibly make when you play such a perfect game, basically, and you absolutely blow out the Knicks? Indiana won Game 4, 121-89. So after you do that, you win by, 32 points? Like, what else can you even do? And look at the stats in that game, man. Indiana shot 56.8% from the field to the Knicks 33.7%. They shot 45.2% from three to the Knicks 18.9%. Those are just complete outlier percentages, man. You've got to expect a gravitation back to the mean in both cases. Like, you can't expect that Indiana's going to continue to shoot that well, or that the Knicks are going to continue to shoot that horribly. So there's got to be some regression back to the mean, especially when you're flipping the series back to Indiana in this one. And the Pacers also out-rebounded the Knicks. And the one thing the Knicks have been dominant in, like, throughout the playoffs, although Anunoby being out does affect this. So the Knicks have been the team that's dominated the rebound battle pretty much all throughout the playoffs. So you kind of expect that the Knicks being back at home are probably going to have a better time of it in the rebounding department than they did in that game. They just really got outplayed in that one, man. I kind of don't expect that to happen in both home games. Although, granted, Anunoby played the first game and he got injured in the second game. But the Knicks out-rebounded the Pacers in both of those games by double digits. And then in Game 3 of the playoffs, the Knicks also out-rebounded the Pacers by double digits. So the Knicks have had the rebounding edge in 3 of the 4 games. So I expect that to have kind of been a fluke as well. So a lot of things about that game were a fluke, man. So I think that this is a good bounce back spot for the Knicks here. They have the adjustments to make here. Indiana, after you play such a perfect game like that, what else can you do? And you might have a tendency to even maybe if you take your foot off the gas a little bit, because everything worked so well in that game. Now you got the Knicks in a playoff series, man. A team coming off a blowout loss like that tends to be a good play in general. I know it didn't work out for the T-Wolves the other night, but in general, it's been a good play. It worked out for the Nuggets in the game prior to that. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to play on the New York Knicks here, -2.5. I expect that to be the case and expect them to bounce back. And like I said, very much statistical anomalies in that game. And just the statistics were so lopsided in that game, and some of them being in some kind of unsustainable ways. So I expect more of a regression back to at least a much closer game in this one. And I expect the Knicks to play well at home again and be able to do this. Let's see. Moving on to Major League Baseball, we actually have 2 plays. I was kind of looking at some other ones. I kind of had my eye on Game 2 in the Washington and White Sox series, but I kind of hesitate to play into Game 2, even though I've done it before, just because you don't know what the bullpen usage is going to be in the afternoon game in Game 1, because those teams had a rain out last night, so they're making up the game today, playing a doubleheader today. But Game 2, you got Mitchell Parker, the young pitcher for Washington, who's been pitching pretty well in his first season in the majors. He's only had a few starts so far in his young career. He hasn't been notching a lot of strikeouts. That's not really his game, but his other statistics are pretty good, and you expect him to have an edge early on against a fairly poor hitting White Sox lineup that hasn't seen him before. And he's up against Eric Fetting on the other side, who's having a pretty good season so far. His stats are good this season, but his stats against Washington's hitters are kind of mediocre, and his career numbers are actually a lot worse than this season. So I do expect Fetty to kind of regress a little bit, and his walk numbers haven't really been that impressive. He's been pitching well so far this season, but yeah, I expect him to I think it's kind of an outlier if you look at what he's been doing in his career, and his stats aren't that good against Washington, so I kind of hesitate to actually want to play on that one. And even though I think in that one, you see the line moving down a little bit. It opened 8.5 juice to the under and has moved down just a tick to 8 juice to the over. So it looks like maybe there has been some movement towards the under in that one. That is the way that I lean in that one. And I think I had one other lean, but maybe I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I do not. No, whatever. We'll just talk about the games I'm actually going to be on. One game I think I'm fading what we see in the market here, and I'm just doing it anyway, man. In the early evening slate, I'm going to be on the over in the Blue Jays Baltimore game. I actually think we're getting value on the over here, even though the market is moving against it. The market has moved down from 8.5 down to 8.5 juice to the under, so you can get a better value right now on the over 8.5. You might even be able to get over 8 if it keeps moving down. I see 84% of the tickets on the under, so the under, for some reason, seems to have the public majority, which doesn't, although it's not that heavy, which doesn't make sense to me. But I also see 94% of the cash on the under, which worries me a little bit, and the line movement coming in on the under. But I just don't see it, man. I think that there's some value for a couple of reasons. Yesterday's game was low scoring, so I think that might have this number being a little bit lower than it should be. Baltimore losing 3-2, but I mean, look at what the starting pitching matchup was yesterday, man. You had Burns pitched for Baltimore, so of course you don't expect that Baltimore is going to allow that many runs in a game where Burns is pitching, right? I mean, he's their ace. He's very, very good. And on the other side, Barrios pitched for the Blue Jays, and he's one of their better pitchers. He's got really good stats so far this year, so he pitched well as well. So that was a pitching matchup, man, and that is certainly not the case in this game. So I think that obviously that was a major reason why that game was so low scoring, is both teams had very good starting pitchers go. And now what you have is a situation where Baltimore, after Burns came out, they burned through a lot of their bullpen, man. Look at what they did with their bullpen. They used 5 relief pitchers, and the Blue Jays only used 2. So I kind of would lean to the Blue Jays for that reason as well, although I'm not sure that they have the starting pitching edge in this one. But I think their bullpen is definitely at an advantage. The Blue Jays bullpen is at an advantage, having only used 2 relievers yesterday, and the Orioles used 5 and used some of their better relievers. But I think that might help us with the over here, because the Orioles, I mean, their bullpen is very burned out coming into this one. So I think that helps as well. I would like it a little better if both bullpens were burned out, but at least you have the Orioles bullpen having been burned out coming into this one. And then we look at the starting pitching matchup here. You got Kyle Bradish pitching for the Orioles, man. And his stats are misleading, man. And he's got a 1.86 ERA so far this season, which I think is kind of part of the reason why we're seeing an under, or why we're seeing a low total, in this game. Maybe a lower total than what it should be. But he has a 1.24 whip. So that's indicative that his ERA should be higher than 1.86. All right, 1.24, you should probably see his ERA being in like the high 3s, maybe around 4. 1.86, there's just no way that that's going to sustain itself. He's only made 2 starts so far this year, so it's a very small sample size. And looking at his stats, his strikeout numbers were way higher than what they've been over his career. So over his career, he's been slightly below 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. So far this season, he's got 14 strikeouts in 9 2/3. So, maybe he started to turn it on, but I don't expect that that's going to continue, really. And he has 4 walks in 9 2/3 and 8 hits allowed. So, like I said, that's not good. He's been putting men on base, which is why his whip is high. He did not go that deep into his first start, but it was against the Yankees, so you could give him a break on that one. And then he did pitch pretty well, actually, against Washington, who don't have a good offense. So his first 2 starts actually were not too bad so far this season. And yeah, last year he actually had good stats with a 2.83 ERA and 1.04 whip. And he's a fairly young guy, 27, but kind of a late start to his career, really, because that was only his second his second season of his career. And in his first season, he had a much higher ERA and whip, 4.9 and 1.4. So you could say, well, he's adjusting to the majors, and he turned it on and started trending in the right direction, getting a lot better last season. Sure, yeah, I mean, that is true. That might be the case. He got better last season. I would put more stock into last season than the season before that. And the season before that, he had 7 fewer games started. But where I think this gives us the play on the over here is looking at his stats against the Blue Jays. And I think we're maybe even getting some value on the over because the Blue Jays offense is really not turned it on. Why is my mic like falling? Holy shit. I'm sorry if my voice is not been as loud as it should be. Holy shit. Oh my God. I don't even know what I'm going to do here, man. I can't even. I'm tightening my mic on the fly here. All right. This is horrible. All right. Yeah. So the Blue Jays, I don't even know what I'm going to do about my mic. Oh, man. I apologize for this. Doing it on the fly. Hey, here we go. Better off dead. My mic might be dead by the end of it. I don't know how my mic slid down like that. Hopefully you can still hear me in the video. All right. I'm going to have to get a new mic stand or something. All right. What was I saying? Yeah, so Bradish on his career, this is where you get I think, so the Blue Jays, obviously they have some good hitters on this team, man. I think they've just been underperforming offensively early in the season. And sometimes that happens with cold weather and stuff. So I expect the Blue Jays to eventually start turning it on. I mean, we know that they're capable of putting up really good offensive stats, right? And let's look at Bradish against the Blue Jays hitters over his career. Pretty big sample size. They're 29 for 98 off him lifetime with 6 doubles, 5 home runs, 14 RBIs, and he only has a 13.9 strikeout walk ratio against them. That's a 296 opponent batting average and 865 OPS. So Bradish has really not been good against these Baltimore hitters. And then on the other side, Chris Bassett, he has not been pitching well this season, man. I'm sorry. 5.06 ERA so far. He has more starts than Bradish does this season so far, so a bigger sample size to work with. 5.06 ERA and 1.55 whip. I mean, there's nothing really being disguised there. He just hasn't been good this season. He's got 20 walks and 46 hits allowed in 42 2/3. None of that is good, even though the 40 strikeouts is fine. The walk number is insanely high, and he's allowing too many hits. I mean, he's faced a lot of difficult offenses, so that's for sure. He's faced, Houston, Yankees, San Diego's not that easy either, really. Philadelphia, LA Dodgers. So he hasn't had it that easy, and his stats on his career are certainly better, yes. He has a 3.55 ERA in his career, 1.21 whip, sure. He's never really been a strikeout guy, and he's always kind of had a little bit of a high walk number over his career. Although his career numbers, like I said, they are definitely a lot better than what they are this season. So I expect him to kind of revert back, although he is kind of old now at 35. But last year he had a pretty good season with Toronto. And the couple seasons before that, he was pretty good as well with Oakland and with the Mets. So I do expect his numbers to kind of come back to the mean sort of and wind up being a lot better than they are right now. But even so, where this clinches it for me is look at his stats against Baltimore's hitters, man. We know Baltimore has a good offense. Both of these teams have good offenses. Baltimore's hitters are 18 for 50 off him lifetime. So again, we're working with not a small sample size here. 18 for 50, 5 doubles, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs. He doesn't have a 14.3 strikeout walk ratio against them. So those are the only good stats he has really against them because it's a 360 opponent batting average and 1,036 OPS. So Chris Bassett. So where I think we get this, the reason why I like this to go over, as you can already tell what I've just said, we actually have 2 good offenses here. And I think the offenses, because they've struggled at times this season so far, I think we're actually getting value on an over here. We have 2 good offenses and offenses that have good history against the opposing starting pitchers, man. It comes down to that. Both starting pitchers have bad numbers against these opposing hitters. I think Bradish's stats are worse. I mean, Bradish looks better than he actually is this season so far. And Chris Bassett, he's just not been pitching well this year. So all of that puts me on the over in this one. And then in the other game, I am actually going to be agreeing with the market on the Texas Rangers. I'm going to go full game on this one because it is a situational play as part of it, but I like the pitching matchup to some extent as well. Cleveland is public. They have 67% of the tickets and only 62% of the cash. Even though you got Texas are the returning champs, but the public is fickle, man, and they go based on what they've seen so far this season. And what they've seen is Cleveland has a really good record. They're in first place in the AL Central, whereas Texas has been struggling at the beginning of the season, man. They've started playing better somewhat recently, but they're on a bad streak right now, man. They got swept by the Colorado Rockies. I don't know how that could possibly happen. And lost the first game of this series against Cleveland. So Texas, they had gotten back above 500, and they were more above 500 than they are now. I think they were in first place for a bit, but now they're 1.5 games out behind Seattle. So the public is going to be on Cleveland here, as they are. But it looks like, as I said, less of the cash than the tickets are on Cleveland. So the public is on Cleveland more heavily than the money is. And we've seen the money go up on Texas, the money line up from -105 to -110. So we see reverse line movement against a public road underdog in Cleveland. That usually tends to indicate that you want to be on the favorite when you see market indicators like that. Cleveland public with less of the cash than the tickets on them, in Texas having the line moving up on them a little bit. Texas, I think, is also in a good spot because they're returning home from they were returning home from a 3-series road trip, man, that took them, to Kansas City, and then they went out to the Pacific Coast, to Oakland for a 4-game series, and then they went into elevation and just didn't play well against the Rockies, and then returned home. That was a tough spot for them yesterday, man. I think I didn't play it because I didn't love the pitching matchup for Cleveland, but Texas, terrible spot for them, really, returning home from a 3-series road trip. As I always say, it tends to be a distracted spot. Teams don't do well in their first game home from a road trip, typically, and that was the spot there. And Texas lost 7-0, just an embarrassing loss. And Cleveland, another benefit here, Cleveland actually used 4 relievers while Texas only used 3. So Lorenzen actually went further into the game than Bibby did. So Texas actually kind of saved some of their bullpen. Their bullpen was actually the reason why they lost the game. It was actually a 0-0 game into the 8th inning, so kind of a misleading result there, too. Texas's bullpen just kind of gave it up, but they didn't use their bullpen very much, whereas Cleveland used more of their bullpen in the game. So I think we actually get a bullpen rest edge here for Texas as well, but also when you're a team that had a really bad game in your first game home from a road trip, it tends to be a positive spot in the next game off of the road trip. You tend to do better in the next game. It tends to be a much better bounce back spot. You have your home distractions kind of taken care of now. You can focus on baseball, and the fact that you lost badly in that first game, that tends to refocus you, man. So I expect a lot more focus from Texas in game 2 here than they had in game 1 in the bad spot in the return home. Now they lost an ugly final score result here. I expect them to bounce back here. So Texas in a much better situational spot here. They have the bullpen rest edge slightly, and then looking at the starting pitching matchup, Cleveland has the much older pitcher, so that is one thing that is going to put me on Texas. Ben Lively, I don't think we even really know what to expect out of Lively, man. I think he is a big question mark. His stats look pretty good on the season because he has a 2.63 ERA so far this season, but he's only made 5 starts, and 2 of them were against Boston. One of them was against Anaheim. I mean, they can't hit either. And one of them was against the White Sox. So he's faced some bad offenses other than facing Atlanta, which his start was okay, but he only made it 4 1/3. So that was the start where he didn't go deep into the game there against Atlanta. Other than that, he's faced fairly weak offenses. I mean, Boston's, I guess, is okay, but he hasn't faced the best offenses so far. And he has a 1.21 whip, so he's been putting more men on base than that ERA would kind of indicate. He's a guy who's bounced around. He's been in the league since 2017, kind of a late start to his career. He's just kind of been a journeyman. He's never really pitched a full season in the majors. 2018 and 2019, we didn't see much of him at all. And then he wasn't in the majors at all again until last year, 2023, when he actually turned into a starter again and actually had his most appearances out of any of his seasons, and he had a 5.38 ERA and 1.36 WHIP last year for Cincinnati. Granted, Cincinnati is a very hitter-friendly park, but still, there's nothing to like about his stats, man, over his career. 4.77 ERA, 1.39 WHIP. What is there to like about that? So you've got to expect his ERA to regress, and even his 1.21 WHIP this year would have to indicate that he's not going to continue having an ERA this low. He's walked 9 guys so far in 27 and a third, which isn't great. 26-9 strikeout walk ratio isn't terrible, but again, you've got to expect some regression out of him. His career stats, very unimpressive. But it is true that Texas basically has never seen him before. Only Semien has seen him before, and he's 0 for 2 off him lifetime with a strikeout. So effectively, Texas has never seen him before, but which I do tend to say that that's an advantage to the pitcher because the opposing hitters don't know what to expect. But in Lively's case, he's just not a very good pitcher, man. So I think you need 2 things. You need the pitcher to be unfamiliar to the hitters, and you need them to actually be a good pitcher to have that advantage there. And I think Lively's missing that second component. Whereas on the other side, I think we actually do have that component in Jack Leiter. I'm going back to Jack Leiter again, man. He's only 24 years old. His stats look awful. So the public is going to come in and say, wait, you're giving me a Cleveland pitcher as a 2-something ERA against Jack Leiter as a 12.91 ERA and 2.35 WHIP. This is so easy, man. You're giving me the team with the better record and the team with the better record and the team that has the starting pitcher with a way better ERA. Give me that, man. Give me Cleveland. That's what the public is going to say. I think that's very misleading, man. Leiter, I think, is the better pitcher. I think we just have to wait a little bit, and I think we're going to see better out of him. He improved from his first start to his second start. I mean, of course, you can't be much worse than giving up 7 earned runs, 3 walks, 8 hits, and 3 2/3 against Detroit. So, yeah, horrible debut, yes. Terrible debut. In his second start, he did better, though. Trending in the right direction. Against Oakland, Oakland, they do suck, kind of. I mean, their hitting has been bad, but their hitting has actually been better recently. And in that game, he did improve from the first start, only giving up 4 earned runs and no walks in that one, at least. So he actually had a 3.0 strikeout walk ratio, so that's good. So that means his control improved in that one quite a bit. He was hittable. He gave up 7 hits, and he gave up 2 home runs. So it's kind of crazy that he didn't give up more than 4 earned runs. He gave up 6 runs. 2 of them were unearned, though. But I think he's trending in the right direction, man, and we might see him continue to progress. I mean, Jack Leiter, he's Al Leiter's son, as I said. He throws more high heat stuff than his father did. His father was more of a control pitcher. Jack Leiter is more of a fastball pitcher coming in. He's a guy that can strike. He has more strikeout potential for sure. And we've even seen that so far this season in that limited sample size with the 6 strikeouts. It's not terrible. I think he's going to continue to trend in the right direction, man. Maybe he was nervous in that first game, pitched better in the second game, and maybe he'll pitch better in this third game too. So he also, of course, has never been seen before by these Texas hitters. I think there isn't that much footage on him because he's only made 2 major league starts in his career. So, not Texas hitters, Cleveland's hitters, So I think he's going to have the edge, man, because he has better stuff than Lively does, and he hasn't been seen before by the opposing hitters. And we are seeing the market indicators on the Texas side. So I think we're going to take all of that into account, man. So I do think they actually have the starting pitching edge a little bit with Jack Leiter there for all the reasons that I said, but I think the situational edge is there with Texas being in a much better spot in the second game, returning home from the road trip after an awful first game. I think they're in a bounce-back spot, and they have the more rested bullpen. So all of that's going to put me on Texas. So the 3 plays today are going to be the New York Knicks in basketball, -2.5. We're going to be over in the Baltimore-Toronto game, over 8.5 right now. You can get that at even money right now, and you could probably wind up getting an over 8, maybe if you wait. So it might be a wait-and-see type of approach on that one. And then Texas Rangers, you can get at -110 right now. So that's like really just playing them at a price, like basically that's pick them just to win the game. So that's going to do it for me, man. Let's get it done. Peace.